Time for a little hockey card history. This week, we're talking about the worst airbrushes in hockey card history. Now, keep in mind, when I'm talking hockey card history, I'm talking about the cards in my collection that I can dig up and show to you. So if you have some different opinions, let me know. Now, there have been some great airbrushes over the years by OPG. I'm thinking Mike Krushelnyski, 88, 89, when he was traded to the Kings with Wayne Gretzky. That was a beauty. We'll get to the good airbrushes in a future episode. First, I want to talk about the bad airbrushes, starting with number 10 and a Hockey Hall of Famer. He deserves more respect than this, but you know what? 89, 90 OPG, they gave us some bad airbrushes. I'm talking about Larry Robinson. Look at that airbrush. You don't really know where the sweater ends and the world begins. Now, the reason OPG had to airbrush Larry Robinson was in the summer of 89, he left the Montreal Canadiens for the LA Kings for a then whopping $400,000 per year. At 3 years, we're talking $1.2 million. At $1.2 million, you think you'd get a better airbrush than that. More on 89-90 in just a bit. Number 9, my good buddy, Denis Maruk. Look at that. Down at the bottom, now with capitals. Airbrushed from Cleveland Barons colors to Minnesota North Stars colors, because Dennis started the season with the North Stars for 2 games. OPG airbrushed in some green, a lot of green, but then he was suddenly traded to the Capitals. So, and if you notice as well, the CCM is airbrushed over on the helmet. So for all you CCM helmet connoisseurs, you know that's a CCM, but the world wouldn't know because old OPG and their crayon artists, they painted right over it. Okay, number 8, we're going back to 89-90 OPG. This is a really bad airbrush of a really solid defenseman, a really good man too. He was a former head coach in the National Hockey League. Look at the shoulders on Randy Cunneyworth. That is a massive shoulder combined with a painted Sherwood hockey stick. Now, I don't know why you have to paint the stick. And if I can just zoom in, look at the gloves. That is top crayon quality. You'd think by 89-90, the Photoshop ability would be a little better. That is not a good airbrush job. Not at all. Okay, we're going to go a little back in time. We're going to talk about one of Denis Maruk's former teammates with Cleveland. Wow, he was a good, bad team goalie. As Jeff Merrick says, if this guy played for the Montreal Canadiens, he'd be in the Hall of Fame, and that's probably true. Gilles Meloche, what a horrible job on that Minnesota North Stars uniform. That thing looks like a bed sheet. The N is the size of the greater St. Paul, Minneapolis area, and they airbrushed his hockey stick as well. I don't understand why guys would have to airbrush hockey sticks. That's Gilles Meloche. Man, Gilles Meloche played for some bad teams, and he was a really good goalie. He played for the California Golden Seals, the Cleveland Barons, Minnesota when they weren't that swell, Pittsburgh when they weren't that swell for a stretch in the 80s. But he was a really good goalie, and that is a really bad airbrush. That's Gilles Meloche basically wearing a Minnesota North Stars bed sheet. Okay, this is a strange one. We're going to go to 83-84 OPG, and this is Ken Solheim. Now, at first glance, it's not the worst airbrush job I've ever seen, but it's the most unnecessary airbrush job I've ever seen. For Ken Solheim was traded from Detroit to Minnesota for future considerations. Now, what makes this such a bad airbrush job, the future considerations were Ken Solheim. He was basically traded for himself. So OPG could have just went back to his original Minnesota pitcher. Instead, they airbrushed Detroit on for his trade back to Minnesota, which makes no sense. Almost erratic as my quarantine hair at this moment. Okay, this one, wow. You actually have to look really closely at the card to realize who the goaltender is. Now, this is airbrushing perhaps, well, at its worst, or at least, well, almost worst in my countdown. Because this is Dan Bouchard. He was a really good goalie. He was playing for the Quebec Nordiques when he was traded to Winnipeg. And if you look really closely, you can actually see a little tiny picture of Dan Bouchard in there, just his face, because the artist went wild. They just didn't know where to stop, didn't know where to start with this Winnipeg Jets uniform. That is a lot of unnecessary artwork. So once again, just zoom in real tight, and you can see Dan Bouchard's face. Dan Bouchard, man, he took place in some wicked Battle of Quebecs with the Quebec Nordiques against the Montreal Canadiens. Okay, a rookie card of the only Toronto Maple Leaf to have 3 50-goal seasons. Rookie card of the first man in Maple Leafs history to score 50 goals in a season, Rookie card of the man they call Squid from Prince Edward Island, who was traded from Vancouver to the Toronto Maple Leafs. We're talking Rick Vaive. Now, what stands out about this airbrush? What makes this airbrush so bad? It's not the shoulders. That's pretty decent. It's the fact that OPG decided to airbrush Rick Vaive's hair. I don't understand why they did this. When he was traded, his hair didn't change. However, OPG airbrushed Squid's hair. That makes no sense. Of course, this card came about because of that trade from Vancouver to Toronto, which was an absolutely outstanding thing for Rick Vaive and his career, except for the airbrushed hair. And the beauty thing is, we put little blue tints in there, little grayish tints. That's actually not some bad artwork, actually, on that Rick Vaive rookie card. Okay, number 3. This is indeed a classic. 71-72 Rogatien Vachon, traded from the Montreal Canadiens to the LA Kings, and they're then airbrushed. That is his head clearly pasted on a body. Rogie doesn't have the LA tan of that body, but he's all smiles when his head was pasted onto the body of Ross Lonsberry. This has been proven by card geeks over the years. Look at the lower body. Look at the chest hair. That is Rogatien Vachon's head on Ross Lonsberry's body. That trade, of course, came about after a young goaltender named Ken Dryden emerged with the Montreal Canadiens. Okay, number 2 on my list. This is a bad one, and this one remains a mystery. If you can help me solve it, please do. Late 70s, early 80s, there were 2 Brian Maxwells on the pro hockey circuit. One was in the NHL. One was in the NHL a little later on. Both Brian Maxwells played in the NHL. This Brian Maxwell had 3 cards. This is Brian Maxwell's rookie card, played in the WHA for the Cincinnati Stingers. And you have to look at the logo to know that, because the shirt will tell you nothing. In fact, that you look at this card, it's just a bed of white. There's not even any body lines from where the arm separates from the body. Now, what makes this card even worse for the Brian Maxwell is, 1, it's his rookie card, and 2, that is not Brian Maxwell on the card. Now, I had this card in my first book, Hockey Card Stories, and for the life of me, I could not figure out who the person is on Brian Maxwell's rookie card. Brian Maxwell doesn't know who the person is on Brian Maxwell's rookie card. So if you know, leave a comment. Let me know on Twitter or Instagram. But that is one bad airbrush because, well, 1, it's the wrong guy. 2, there's no logo. 3, there's no body separation. Come on, airbrushing's art. Stick with it. Okay, worst airbrushed hockey card of all time. For all you hockey card geeks like myself, you know what is coming. This card has been talked about for years. In fact, it's been talked about by the very man himself who's on this card. Bill Clement filled me in on this beauty. His 75-76 Washington Capitals card. That is an awful airbrush. Why is it an awful airbrush? Well, first off, Bill went from the Philadelphia Flyers, the Stanley Cup champion Philadelphia Flyers, where he won 2 cups in a row, to what he called the dog meat Capitals. Now, the Washington Capitals, they weren't just bad, they were record-settingly bad in the mid-70s. So that's part of the problem. Second, look at the uniform. That's not good artwork by the artist. That's crayon-esque. Once again, they paint the stick. Thirdly, look at the ankles on Bill. Look at the calves on Bill. They're not all that strong. Bill Clement was a big man. Bill Clement was 6'1", 190. Did those look like the calves and shin pads of a 6'1", 190-pound center in the National Hockey League? So anyway, Clement goes from the Philadelphia Flyers to the Washington Capitals, and that, to me, is the worst airbrush card of all time. There's some great airbrushes, too. We'll get to that, like I said, in the future. Worst airbrushes. Was I right? Was I wrong? Let me know. If you like that video, wicked good. Make sure you click the button below and subscribe to the Sportsnet YouTube channel for video after video of endless awesomeness.